In our last tutorial, we covered the basics of Shapr3D. Now I've linked to that tutorial below in case you've missed it. Now in this one, we're going to go further, but I want to be upfront about why I'm not jumping straight into building something complex yet. Now, the reason is simple. Essentially, I see new users almost always getting ahead of themselves. They drop in their first cube and then they just start piling on geometry before they've even fully understood the fundamentals. The way I look at it is it's kind of like trying to tackle calculus before you've even learned long division. There's a sequence to this stuff, and skipping steps makes everything harder than it needs to be. So before we build anything ambitious, I just want to walk you through the 5 biggest mistakes that beginners make in Shapr3D. Now, these are the things that cause the most frustration and confusion when you're just starting out. And once you understand these things, everything else just gets a lot easier. Now, today we're going to cover things like initial positioning, orientation and alignment, proportions and sizing, the difference between new bodies and unions, how to reuse elements in your designs without having to rebuild them from scratch, and finally, we're going to talk about how to use construction lines and construction planes to align and mirror your geometry. But before we jump in, I just want to take a quick second and tell you about LightLoop. Now, we build AI-powered tools specifically for product designers like you. Think professional studio renders, editorial marketing materials, product videos, 2D technical line drawings, and even 3D models, all generated from a simple text description or photo of your product or even just a product idea. So whether you're trying to validate an early concept, present an idea to a client, or create marketing materials that actually do your product justice, LightLoop can help you do that in a fraction of the time that it would normally take. A link to LightLoop can be found below. Okay, so now let's jump in. So the single biggest thing that I see people new to 3D modeling struggle with is with positioning, orientation, and alignment. Now, I think people are just so excited to get their first cube on the canvas that they don't put too much thought into where to place that cube. And the issue here is that although you'll be able to place your geometry on the canvas, generally speaking, wherever you want, you might find it harder to start using more advanced tools, for example, like the mirror tool or the pattern tool later on. Now, you'll try, for example, to mirror one side of your object a little later on in your construction, only to have the mirrored version of your body positioned nowhere near where you intended to have it. This is very, very common if you're just getting started out. Or, for example, you'll learn how to use the pattern tool, but then when you try to wrap it around an object that you've created, you have it in this strange orbit way off the plane that you expected it on. Now, if you're just starting out, these issues can become enormously frustrating and they cause some people just to give up. But the good news is that with a little upfront planning, all of this is entirely avoidable. Now, the easiest way to solve most beginner problems if you're just getting started with Shapr3D is to start your new projects at the origin point. Now, this allows you to use this origin as the center reference. And by default, when you create a new project, construction planes are already placed on your canvas at the origin of the X, Y, and Z axes. So if I'm positioned on an angle here, and then I click on my sketch icon, you'll see these planes represented as these little gray squares here. Now, I'm going to talk a lot more about construction planes shortly, but for now, let's just begin by creating a new rectangle on our canvas. Now, let's begin by clicking on top and then clicking on sketch. And then what we'll do is we'll click on this rectangle icon here. But let's make sure that we have the centered rectangle selected by clicking on this little arrow here and then selecting center. Okay, so now let's go to our origin, this little dot right here. Now our pointer should snap to it, but if it doesn't, simply click on this magnet icon here and then ensure all of your snapping options are turned on, then try again. Also, keep in mind that I'm using inches for my build here. Okay, so now let's draw this rectangle. Again, we're starting exactly from the origin and we're doing this because it's going to allow us to use pre-existing construction planes. Okay, so now for the next most common error people make when getting started with Shapr3D. They don't design to scale and they use random hard to divide measurements. So we're going to create our base sketch here to be 8 inches across and 4 inches high. Now this way, if you ever get lost or for whatever reason you just can't figure out how to toggle on or off your center points or your reference geometry, you'll always know how to divide these values to find your midpoints. Using simple numbers is just a good worst case scenario planning tool for beginners. Also, at this point, if your numbers are really, really big or really small, you simply need to just zoom in or zoom out to get your scale right. Okay, so here we are, we're 8 inches across and 4 inches high. Now let's exit sketching here and then extrude this face up, which I taught you how to do in the last tutorial. And we're going to extrude up to 2 inches here. Again, the reason why we're going to 2 inches right now is that it makes finding your center points much easier if you ever get lost. Of course, as you progress, you don't need to do this any longer, but if you're just getting started, these little things might help. Now notice now as we zoom around our new shape, all of our axis lines intersect at the center of the base of this object. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start building on top of a plane. Now we actually did this in our first step when we clicked on top and started sketching. We just built this right on top of our default base plane. But let's imagine that we don't want to use the various axes of our canvas as our plane any longer, but instead we want to use a face within our existing object. Now that's very easy to do by simply selecting the face that you want to use as a plane and then hitting the space bar on your keyboard. So we'll do that for this side here, and then we'll zoom out a little bit. And now we're using this face as a sort of canvas to draw on top of. Now, I've already talked about how initial positioning and sizing are major contributing factors to getting lost. And now I'm going to show you the next thing which causes a lot of confusion. So let's draw a square on the side of this rectangle here. And we'll draw our square that will be 0.4 by 0.4 inches. Again, all easily divisible for worst case scenario planning. Okay, so let's exit sketch mode then, and then extrude this shape out a little bit. And now, as we start to extrude, I want to show you that a little icon shows up right here, which allows us to control how this new body is to interact with the body that we sketched on top of. So for example, if I click on this icon now, you'll see that by default, it's set to union, which means it's part of the original body. It's not something separate. And this could be a big problem if we were intending to mirror this object on the other side of this larger rectangle here, because we wouldn't be able to isolate this square as its own object. So by keeping union selected, it will become part of this bigger rectangle that we're building on top of. Now let me just actually show you the problem here by simply clicking out here and then toggling on and off this body. Notice that the entire body, including this little square here, is toggled on and off. But imagine the square we just created was going to be the exterior housing, for example, of some type of input jack. And let's imagine that we wanted to be able to control that as a separate and isolated part of our design. So perhaps we might want to scale it or rotate it or duplicate it or mirror it and so on without having to scale, duplicate, rotate, or mirror the entire rectangular body. Okay, so this is how we deal with this problem. Now let me just get rid of some of these unnecessary items in my sidebar here, and then we'll start this process over again. Okay, so again, let's click on this face here, and then let's click on our space bar to set the face as the plane that we want to build on top of. Again, let's create a 0.4 by 0.4 square, and then let's exit sketching. Again, let's change our angle a bit here, and then let's select the face of our square to extrude the face. But now let's click on this icon, and here what we're going to do is we're going to change it from union, which was making it part of the existing body, to new body, which will make it its own separate body. Now when we do that and then click out, notice that a new body is added in the sidebar here. So what we'll do now is we'll rename these bodies to main rectangle and small square. So this will allow us to easily reference these items later on. So notice now that when we toggle the visibility of one body on or off, it doesn't affect the other. They are now distinct items that we can control separately. And this gives us much more granular control over the individual components of our design. Now, a couple of caveats here, though, about using these techniques. So if geometry is part of the same body, it can be easier to create clean and seamless geometry between those parts. So for example, here, notice I can select this edge and then apply a fillet, seamlessly merging these two components together if they are part of the same body, but I cannot do that if they are separate bodies. Now, this is how the same operation looks if these two items here were separate bodies. So next, as a general rule of thumb, you should keep your components as unique bodies when you're still in the design phase and you need to be able to move things around, perhaps use these elements as cutting tools or in Boolean operations and so on. Likewise, you might need to apply different materials to a body, or you might need to 3D print components as separate components altogether. In all of these cases, keeping the body separate will be the right approach. However, you might want to join the elements together or use the union tool when you're done designing and you feel comfortable kind of committing your changes as part of a unified object. You might also just want to simplify your project by merging complementary parts together so that you have less loose parts to manage, or you might want to put things together because you want accurate mass or volume calculations for the entire project. It should also be mentioned that your initial decision to keep an object as its own body or union it with another body isn't always permanent. You can generally take a separate body and merge it into an existing geometry later on using the union tool. Also, if you ever need to detach two joined objects, you can often do this, again, depending on the complexity of your build, using the split body tool. Okay, now that you know what goes into making the decision to merge or not to merge, let's get back to our build. Now, this is where things start to come together because now what we can do is we can mirror this little extrusion here without mirroring the entire body because we've made this its own thing. It's not part of something else. So let me show you how to do this. So let's go to search and type in mirror. We can now identify the thing that we want to mirror. I'll click on small square here in my sidebar, and you'll notice that my square is now highlighted. The next thing I need to do is select the plane or linear item to set as my mirror reference. Now, this is easy because we centered our main body around the origin point when we first started this tutorial, so we can simply use one of these pre-built planes, which remember are these little gray squares here, to mirror around. Now in my case, they are inside my object here. So let me just temporarily hide my main rectangle here by clicking on this eye icon right here. And then I can click on this plane here, which will mirror my small square on the other side of my rectangle. Now when I'm done, I can click on this check mark and then I can turn back on my main rectangle's visibility. Now it's fundamental for you to understand right now that Shapr3D uses this invisible center point, which we call a plane or a construction plane, as the halfway point or the mirror's reference point to create this effect. So for example, if this little box is 4 inches out to the right, the mirror effect simply mirrored it 4 inches out to the left. And if all of this came together properly, you'll see that we now have these little squares on both sides of our rectangle. So this could be a huge time saver because if we're creating a symmetrical object, we can do the work on one of our faces just once, and then we can simply duplicate that work to show up on, for example, either the front, back, left, or right sides. But this is totally dependent on us being able to use a centered construction plane. And in this case, we just used Shapr3D's default construction plane for this. Okay, but here is where things get tricky for newcomers to Shapr3D. For example, what happens now if we needed to build an element off of our origin point? So for example, let's click on this top face here and then hit our spacebar again. Now let's imagine now that we want to create a display box up in this upper right corner here. So let's just do that now by clicking on the rectangle tool here, but let's change the type of rectangle from centered to diagonal. And now let's create a rectangle which is 2 by 1. And you can position it really wherever you want here. I'm just going to place mine here. Now let's get out of sketch mode and then extrude this up 1 inch. Remember, let's imagine that we want to control this new extrusion as its own body. So let's click on this icon here again, and then we'll click on New Body. Then we'll click out and we'll rename this body Top Display. Okay, but now we have a problem because let's imagine that we want to have casing for our input and output jacks on this smaller display as well. Now, the first issue we have to deal with is the fact that we probably don't want to have to redesign this jack's casing, which is this little square here, each time that we want to use it within our design. And the second issue is that this new top display body is not centered on any plane, making using the mirror tool that we used before a little more tricky. So let's deal with each of these issues one by one. So first, let's talk about reusability. Now, currently in Shapr3D, you can't copy or duplicate an item from your sidebar here. Likewise, you can't use the copy and paste keyboard shortcuts. So you might think that you just need to redesign this jack casing or this small square again for your top display here. But luckily, that's not the case. Because we created this small square as its own body, we can copy it by simply selecting it in the sidebar here. And then when we do that, the Move tool should be selected here by default. And with the Move tool selected, you'll see this option for Copy. So let's click that. Now, initially, it will seem like nothing happened, but if you now move the item off to the side here, you'll notice that the item was duplicated. You'll see the duplicated item in the sidebar here as well. So let's call this new item small display square. Okay, so let's click on small display square and then move it up. And then what we'll do now is we'll just push it into this box a little bit. Now to properly center it, let's click on the face of this small display box here and then hit our spacebar. Now you'll see the center point here, but if you're not clicked on the face, the center point goes away. And this is where invisible construction geometry comes into play. So let's click on the face here, and then we'll click on sketch. Now let's draw a line from the center point here all the way down to the center point down here. Now once you're done, click on the escape button to drop the line tool. Now exit sketch mode. Then select the line and click on this option here for make construction. Now what this does is it turns this line into an invisible reference line that we can use to center or align items to on our canvas. Now a construction line is not part of your main design. It's now just been converted into an invisible reference point. So now we can click on our small box here and align its center to this newly created center point. Now, obviously, we could do the same thing here and draw a construction line horizontally as well, but I think you get the point here. So we'll just continue pushing forward. And again, if we're using easily divisible numbers like 2, 4, 10, 20, and so on, and we ever get lost, or for example, we're just brand new to Shapr3D and we just can't figure out how to snap something, or the snapping points aren't showing up, or we couldn't get a construction line working, for example, we could always just manually place it, because the math in our case now, because we're using simple numbers, is just really easy to work with. And remember, if you ever need to look up the sizing of something, there are a couple of different ways. So first, let's click on this edge and then hold down shift and click on this edge. And now here, you'll see the parallel distance down here. Or what you could do is you could simply search for measure here and then click on object measurement. Now here you'll see your parallel distance between 2 points. And if you ever wanted to pin that to your canvas, just so you could always see it, you could do so by simply clicking on this pin icon here. You can always unpin a measurement display by just clicking on unpin. Okay, so here we are, and we have this new little square in place. But how can we mirror it now? If we use the same approach that we used last time, this will happen. Look at this. I'll search for mirror here, and then I'll select it. Now I'll select the body from the sidebar here, which is that small square that we just positioned. And I will also hide my main body here. And then I'll select the same plane as we used before. But look at what happens. It throws this small square off to the far left. It's not connected to this little display box here at all. So the approach which allowed us to get started quickly, which was to use the existing default construction plane, doesn't work anymore because we're off center now. Essentially, we need to mirror this new item at the halfway point of this little display box here, not the halfway point of the canvas. So we need to find a way to find the halfway point or midpoint of this small display box here. Essentially, we need a halfway reference point that we can map our mirror operation to. And this is just one of the things that construction planes help us do. Now, one of the use cases for construction planes is to act as that halfway point. So if construction planes were confusing to you before, hopefully they won't be after this next step. So let's cancel this and try again by creating a properly placed construction plane. So let's click outside of our object here so nothing is selected, and then we'll select add. Now we'll click on construction plane. By default, mine is set to offset, which we don't want right now. We want to find the center point between two faces, so we'll select mid-plane right here. Okay, so now select this face here, and now you don't need to hold down shift or control or anything. You just need to select the second face. So let's select this face now here. So to use this construction plane, you just need to select two faces essentially. And notice that when we do that, a construction plane shows up right in the center here. Now, to make it easier to see, let's just turn the visibility of this display item off right here. Now let's click on done. Now we have something to accurately center our mirror command around. So let's try our mirror tool again. Let's reactivate the visibility of our display here, and then let's search for mirror. Next, I'll select this box from my sidebar here, and it will show up highlighted on the canvas here. Next, I need to select the construction plane. Now, what I can do is I can select this construction plane here. Again, if you can't see it, just toggle the visibility of the display box off temporarily. And once you do that, you can click on Done. And then turn the visibility of your small display back on so you can see that everything has been mirrored properly now. Also, one last really important thing. Remember, previously we could use existing geometry as a plane by clicking on the face of an object and then hitting the spacebar. Well, you can do the same with invisible construction planes. Construction planes allow you to create a plane to build on top of where you have no physical geometry. So for example, I could click on this plane here and then hit the spacebar, and that would align me to this plane. So for example, to drive this point home, I can create a new rectangle on this construction plane. And then what I'll do is I'll just extrude the shape here. And as you can see, the shape wasn't built on top of any existing geometry. It was built on top of this invisible construction plane. So hopefully that helps drive the point home. Okay, so let's quickly recap what we've covered today, because if you can internalize these 5 things, you're already way ahead of the vast majority of people who are just getting started with Shapr3D. So first, we talked about initial positioning, always starting at the origin point so your default construction planes are actually useful to you. Second, we covered proportions and sizing, keeping your measurements simple and easily divisible so you never get stuck doing hard math just to find a midpoint. Third, we covered the difference between new bodies and unions, knowing when to keep geometry separate and when to merge it, and why that decision matters for things like mirroring, duplicating, and controlling individual parts of your design. Fourth, we talked about reusability, because once you've created a body, again, you're not going to want to redesign it from scratch every time you want to reuse it. And finally, we demystified construction lines and construction planes. These were, remember, the invisible reference points that confuse almost every new beginner, but are actually one of the most powerful tools in your kit once you understand what they're actually doing. Now, none of the topics that we discussed today are glamorous topics. We didn't build anything flashy today, but every single one of the things that we talked about today is going to show up again and again and again as we get into more complex builds in this tutorial series. And now when these things do show up, you're going to know exactly what you're looking at. Okay, so remember, if you're working on a product and you need to communicate your ideas to a client or a teammate or to the public, even before you're finished modeling, be sure to check out LightLoop, linked to below. We build AI-powered tools for product designers like you. We can help you create professional studio renders, editorial marketing shots, product videos, technical line drawings, and 3D models, all generated from a single text description or photo of your product. Again, a link to LightLoop can be found below. So thanks for stopping by today, and I hope to see you in the next one.